The MIDI controller messages that we've just talked about can act as alternate modulation sources, and so I could use something like that Yamaha synthesizer and get it to send messages, something like a pitch bend message or a sustain message, and get the Kross to react to it. Why you might want to do this we'll see later, but that's where MIDI becomes important, because we can use alternative modulation sources from other synths and from internal settings as well, which are sending MIDI messages. Now I'm going to walk through each of the available modulation sources, and I'll start with the most obvious, and I'll use them to change a note's pitch. You could use the pitch wheel, but as we have loads of available different modulation sources, let's use some of these instead. I'm going to start using the Unison Square Lead preset, which is number 7 in the synth lead category. And I'm using it because it's a fairly uncomplicated single oscillator sound. And when I start changing the settings, you can hear and see exactly what each control is doing without the waters being cluttered by a second oscillator or other settings on there. So if you select this preset and press the menu key, and then use the wheel at the side of the screen to scroll down to the P pitch page and press OK, you will come to the P pitch basic tab. Now here we can set different alternate modulation sources for pitch and to control the pitch. So if you use the arrow key and tab down, or the down arrow key and tab down to the bit at the bottom that says AMS, you'll see next to the AMS setting an arrow, and beyond that it'll say tempo, I believe, if it's the first one you bring up. But if you use the scroll wheel, you can scroll through the various alternate modulation sources that you can use to control the pitch change. Now I'm going to set this to off first off, and then I'm going to use the right arrow to tab over to the amount, and I'm going to set that using the scroll wheel up to plus 12. This will eventually give a 12 semitone or 1 octave upward pitch bend. There are 12 notes in an octave if you include all the sharps and flats, so that's plus 12. We could set it to plus 11, which would basically be an 11 semitone pitch bend. But I'm going to crank this up to produce a 1 octave pitch bend. Now to produce a 1 octave pitch bend, I'm going to use the arrow to switch back to where it says off, and I'm going to start introducing different modulation sources. And the first one I'm going to use is velocity. So if you use the wheel and you start scrolling through, you'll get to velocity. Now I'm going to pick the ones that are easiest first, and then we'll work our way through to get to the more complicated ones. Press gently. You'll notice that pitch changing as I hit the key with different levels of ferocity. Now, the more violently I hit it, that note will actually be an octave higher than the original setting. That's a C. That's a C an octave higher. That's somewhere near it, but it's very dependent on the velocity or how hard I hit the note. Now, as you've heard, that particular setting doesn't work particularly well with pitch, but if you actually use velocity to change a filter setting, now you can create different tonal changes according to the amount of pressure you use in your key strikes. So that's an interesting point to be made, that we have alternate modulation sources, and some modulation sources work better on different settings than others, and having that alternate modulation source choice gives you the freedom to produce the best results. I'm going to use the scroll wheel again, and I'm going to set it to mod wheel or M wheel hash 01. Now the hash is basically number 1 is the continuous controller message. Now this is where we talked about continuous controller messages previously in the little bit I did about MIDI. So as you can hear, the mod wheel is now changing the pitch up an octave. It's still got its vibrato function applied to it, but it's got an additional control because I'm now using the mod wheel to act as an octave pitch changer. We can make changes to pitch using alternate modulation sources, but we can also change the tone and the volume of a sound. So we can use alternate modulation sources to control filters, to change the tone, and we can use it to change amplifier settings, so the volume will go up and down over time. And we can also use them to control the synth's LFOs, or low frequency oscillators. Now these will allow us to create some crazy stuff like vibrato and panning settings, and control them using things like the mod wheel, the pitch wheel, the foot pedals and the switches. More of these later. Let's look at other modulation sources and how they work on the pitch control. If you press the exit key and you select the saw bass patch, which is in the bass category and it's number 21, you'll get this. What I'm going to do is use the AMS source of velocity to control filter setting. Now we've already seen velocity doesn't work particularly well changing pitch, but let's have a look at it with a filter. And I'm going to use this particular sound, and I'm going to press menu, and I'm going to go down to P filter, press OK, and you'll see a frequency AMS1. Now if you change that to velocity and set the amount to 99, let's get a nice extreme effect, and you also set the resonance to velocity, if I can find it, set that to 99 as well. What will happen is the tone will actually change because the filter is opening and closing depending upon how hard we hit the keys. So you can get some quite interesting sounds. Now I've just used the AMS source velocity to change a filter setting. Now you'll also see EXP velocity. Now that's expressive velocity. Whereas regular velocity works like that, what actually happens with expressive velocity is nothing much happens at the bottom end, and then all of a sudden it goes like that. So you'll hear the difference. It's only right at the top at the end where I really hit it hard that you actually get the extreme pitch velocity change and extreme filter change therefore. So that's 2 AMS settings for the price of 1. Now where I've used the expressive velocity for both frequency and resonance AMS settings here, I've just changed the AMS setting for resonance to the mod wheel, and I've set the amount to plus 59. I've reduced it because it just sounds a bit too ridiculous if it's at 99, but you'll get the regular vibrato effect that the mod wheel tends to bring in, but you'll also get the mod wheel changing the resonance setting, so you'll get this. Nothing's happening because I'm not doing anything at the low end. Now let's bring in the mod wheel as well. So you can get some quite interesting effects.